He wore the same flannel shirt for 15 years. His boots had holes in them. He ate soup from a can every single night. And every morning, before the sun even cracked open the sky, he was already outside, pushing a broom, fixing a fence, doing what had to be done. His neighbors felt sorry for him. His own family thought he was a lost cause. But when he died, they opened a single envelope he had left behind, and what was inside it stopped everyone cold. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about this man. And when you hear what was in that envelope, I promise you, you will never look at the quiet, humble people in your life the same way again. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. His name was Raymond Cole. And if you had passed him on the street in the small town of Millbrook, Tennessee, you would have kept walking. There was nothing about Raymond that screamed remarkable. He was thin, slightly hunched from decades of physical work, with deep creases across his forehead and hands that looked like old leather. He drove a 1987 Chevy pickup truck that rattled so badly the kids in town used to joke that you could hear Raymond coming from 3 miles away. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, a 2-bedroom wood-frame home with a leaky kitchen faucet, a furnace that barely worked in winter, and a backyard that was mostly gravel and overgrown grass. The paint was peeling off the front porch. The gutters were full. People drove past that house every single day and assumed Raymond was just barely getting by. They were not entirely wrong. At least, that is what Raymond let them believe. Raymond had grown up poor. Born in 1942 in rural Tennessee to a father who sharecropped cotton and a mother who took in laundry for other families. They were the kind of poor where you did not waste a single grain of rice, where Christmas meant an orange and a pair of socks, and where asking for anything extra felt like a sin against the family. Raymond's father died when Raymond was just 12 years old, a heart attack in the middle of a field on a Tuesday afternoon in July. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. And from that day forward, Raymond was the man of the house. He dropped out of school, found work at a gas station, and handed every dollar he made to his mother. That was just what you did. You did not cry about it. You worked, you survived, and you moved on. By the time Raymond was 20, he had saved enough to rent a small apartment in town. He got a job at the local hardware store, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, occasionally helping customers find the right bolt or the right length of pipe. He made a little more than minimum wage. He drove a used car. He ate mostly at home because restaurants felt like a waste. His co-workers liked him well enough, though they described him as quiet, even mysterious sometimes. He never talked about money, never complained that his boots were worn through, never asked for a raise, though he was long overdue for one. He just showed up. Every single day. For 32 years, Raymond showed up at that hardware store and did his job without a single word of complaint. He never married. He came close once, a woman named Helen who worked at the diner down the street. They dated for 2 years in their late 20s, and by all accounts it was a quiet, gentle kind of love. She once told her sister that Raymond was the most decent man she had ever known. But something happened between them, something Raymond never talked about, and one spring morning Helen packed up and moved to Nashville to be near her sister. Raymond watched her go and said nothing, just nodded. He went back to work the next morning like nothing had changed. But something in his eyes did change, people who knew him back then say. Something went a little quieter in him after that. He never dated again. And so Raymond built his life alone. He rented a plot in the community garden behind the church and grew tomatoes, corn, and green beans every summer. He read library books, history mostly, sometimes biographies of men like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, men who had started with nothing. On Sunday mornings he walked to the corner store and bought a single copy of the newspaper, sat on his front porch with a cup of black coffee, and read it cover to cover. He did not own a television until 1998. He did not own a cell phone until 2011, and even then it was a basic flip phone he used only for emergencies. To everyone in Millbrook, Raymond Cole was just a quiet old man who had lived a quiet, unremarkable, somewhat sad life. They pitied him, some of them openly, and Raymond never once corrected them. Think about that for a moment. Think about someone you know, maybe a neighbor, maybe an uncle, maybe that quiet person at church who always sits in the back pew. Have you ever stopped to wonder what story they are carrying inside them? What life they have actually lived when no one was watching? Because Raymond had a story, And it was nothing like what anyone in Millbrook imagined. It started with a library. Not a grand, marble-floored library, just the small-town library 2 blocks from the hardware store where Raymond worked. He had started going there in his late 20s, after Helen left, mostly to fill the silence of his evenings. He would check out books on investing, on the stock market, on how compound interest worked. He read every book they had on the subject, and then he started ordering more through an interlibrary loan. Night after night, Raymond Cole sat at his kitchen table under a single light bulb and educated himself on something most people his age and income never thought about: the power of putting money away, slowly, steadily, patiently, for a very long time. He opened a brokerage account in 1971 with $412, every cent of his savings at the time. His first investment was in a telephone company. He bought shares carefully, methodically, always choosing solid companies with long track records. He never chased the hot stock. He never panicked when the market dropped. He never sold in a moment of fear. He simply kept buying, kept holding, kept reinvesting his dividends, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. When the market crashed in 1987, Raymond bought more shares. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, Raymond bought more shares. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, and people all around him were pulling their money out in a panic, Raymond quietly, calmly, bought more shares. He did not tell a single soul about any of it. There was only one person on earth who ever knew Raymond's secret. A man named Gerald Patterson, a retired accountant who had helped Raymond file his taxes since 1979. Gerald had nearly fallen out of his chair the first time he saw Raymond's investment statements. He had sat across from this man for years, assuming Raymond was scraping by. And suddenly here was a portfolio that made no sense next to the flannel shirt and the rattling old truck. Gerald had looked up at Raymond with wide eyes, and Raymond had looked back at him with those calm, steady eyes and said simply, "I'd appreciate it if this stayed between us, Gerald." And Gerald, a man of profound integrity, had kept that promise for 30 years. Do you know what that takes? Do you know what kind of discipline it requires to watch your account grow, to watch it cross 100,000? Then 500,000, then 1,000,000, and say nothing? To keep showing up to work, keep driving the same truck, keep eating soup from a can, keep wearing the same flannel shirt? Most of us, and there is no shame in admitting this, most of us would crack. We would buy something. We would tell someone. We would let it change us. Raymond never did. And the reason why, the real reason, is something that took everyone a long time to understand. Raymond had grown up watching money destroy people. He had seen neighbors tear their families apart fighting over small inheritances. He had watched men who won at cards blow everything within a year. He had read in those library books about lottery winners who ended up worse off than before. Raymond believed, deeply, quietly, almost spiritually, that money was not a destination. It was a tool, and he was not finished building something with his tool. He just had not decided yet what to build. That decision, it turned out, would come in the last months of his life. Raymond Cole was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2019. He was 76 years old. He had gone to the doctor for what he thought was indigestion, and the doctor had looked at his scans and gone very still, the way doctors do when the news is not good. Raymond had driven himself home, sat on his front porch, and watched the sun set over the hills behind Millbrook. He did not cry. He did not call anyone. He poured himself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and he sat in the gathering dark, and he thought. He thought for a very long time, because there were decisions to be made, decisions that had been waiting decades for exactly this moment. And this is where the story shifts. This is where the quiet, unremarkable life of Raymond Cole becomes something that will stay with you long after this video ends. Raymond drove into town the next morning and walked into the offices of a local attorney, a young woman named Ms. Carter, who had only recently set up her practice in Millbrook. He sat down across from her and placed a folded piece of paper on her desk. Ms. Carter looked at the paper, then looked at this thin old man in his worn flannel shirt, and assumed she was looking at a modest will, maybe a house and a car, maybe a few thousand in a savings account. She unfolded the paper, and then she stopped. She read it again. She looked up at Raymond. She looked back at the paper. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Cole," she said slowly, "are these numbers accurate?" Raymond nodded once. "Yes," he said, "they are." The number on that paper was $1.4 billion. Not million, billion. $1.4 billion, built over nearly 50 years through patient, disciplined investing, compounding quietly in the background while Raymond Cole pushed a broom and ate soup from a can and drove a truck held together mostly by rust and stubbornness. Ms. Carter would later say that in all her years of practice, she had never experienced a moment like that one. A man walked into her office who looked like he might need help making rent and handed her the paperwork of one of the wealthiest private individuals in the state of Tennessee. And Raymond sat there calmly, waiting for her to collect herself, with the patience of a man who had spent 50 years waiting for exactly the right moment. Now here is what I want you to sit with. Put yourself in that attorney's chair for 1 second. You have known this man by reputation, the quiet old guy down the street, the one people felt sorry for. And now you are learning that this man that the whole town pitted, had more wealth than most people will ever be able to imagine. How does that hit you? How does it make you feel about every assumption you have ever made about someone based on how they look, what they drive, where they live? Let us know in the comments. Because the town of Millbrook was about to feel that exact same thing, and they were not going to take it quietly. Word travels fast in a small town, and the news of Raymond Cole's wealth traveled at the speed of disbelief. Within a week of Raymond's death in November of 2019, the story had leaked. Not through Ms. Carter, who was bound by professional confidentiality, but through one of Raymond's distant cousins who had been notified as part of the estate process. This cousin, a man named Daryl, who had barely spoken to Raymond in 20 years, showed up at a local diner one morning and could not keep his mouth shut. By noon, the whole town knew, and the reaction was not what you might expect. It was not celebration. It was not admiration. The first reaction, in a lot of people, was shame, because they remembered. They remembered the jokes about the old truck. They remembered the neighbors who had offered Raymond hand-me-down furniture because they assumed he could not afford better. They remembered the church ladies who had dropped off casseroles at Christmas because they worried he was not eating. They remembered the younger men at the hardware store who used to roll their eyes when Raymond talked, who dismissed him as just a worn-out old man with nothing useful to say. And suddenly, every one of those memories had a different meaning. Suddenly, Raymond Cole was not the object of their pity. He was the wisest person in every room he had ever walked into, and none of them had known it. The shame of that, the weight of that, settled over Millbrook like a fog. But what Raymond left behind was not designed to shame anyone. That was never his intention. The terms of his will, which Ms. Carter read at a private gathering 6 weeks after Raymond's passing, made that clear from the first line. Raymond had written it himself, in his careful, unhurried handwriting, and his words were simple. He said, "I did not keep this secret to make anyone feel foolish. I kept it because I wanted the life I actually had, not the life people would have given me if they'd known." Let that settle. He wanted the life he actually had. Not the parties, not the status, not the deference. He wanted to sit on his porch with his coffee. He wanted to walk to the library. He wanted to grow tomatoes and read about Carnegie and tend to his small, quiet corner of the world. And he did, for 76 years, completely and entirely on his own terms. Now here is the part of this story that I want you to hold very close to your heart, because this is where Raymond Cole revealed who he truly was. The will divided his estate with extraordinary precision and extraordinary generosity. A full $400 million, $400 million, went to the Millbrook County Public School System, with specific instructions that every school in the district be fully renovated, that teachers receive meaningful salary increases for the next 20 years, and that a scholarship fund be established for every graduating senior who wanted to go to college but could not afford it. Raymond, who had to drop out at 12 years old, made sure that no child in his town would ever have to make that same choice. Another $200 million went to the local hospital to build a new cancer treatment wing, because Raymond had watched people in this town suffer through illness without proper care, and he had quietly decided years ago that he would fix that one day. He just waited until the right moment to do it. He left money to the library where he had spent so many evenings learning. He left a gift to the community garden. He left modest but meaningful sums to a handful of people in town who had shown him quiet, unassuming kindness over the years. A woman who used to wave at him every morning from her porch, a young man at the grocery store who always helped him carry his bags without being asked, the pastor of the small church Raymond had attended for 30 years without ever joining a committee or sitting on a board. These people received letters along with their gifts, written in Raymond's own hand. And those letters said things like, "You treated me like I mattered on days when I wasn't sure I did. Thank you for that." One woman, the one who had waved at him every morning, reportedly read her letter at her kitchen table and could not stop crying for an hour. Is there someone in your life like that? Someone who has shown up for you in small, quiet ways? Someone you have maybe taken for granted? Because Raymond did not forget a single one of them. He watched. He remembered. He was paying attention the whole time, even when it looked like he was just an old man pushing a broom. The story of Raymond Cole spread far beyond Millbrook, Tennessee. It was picked up by news outlets across the country. Financial journalists wrote pieces about his investment strategy. Personal finance influencers made videos about compound interest and patience and the long game. But those stories, while accurate, missed the deeper truth. Raymond Cole was not primarily a story about money. He was a story about identity, about the radical, almost rebellious act of deciding who you are for yourself, independent of what the world assigns you. Raymond was assigned poverty. He was assigned insignificance. He was assigned the role of the pitted old man at the end of the road. And he accepted those assignments outwardly because they gave him something the wealthy rarely have: peace, invisibility, the freedom to live exactly as he chose. He chose simplicity. He chose stillness. He chose the tomatoes and the library and the Sunday newspaper and the cup of black coffee on the front porch. He chose a life that looked broken from the outside and felt whole from the inside. And in doing so, in exercising that extraordinary patience and that extraordinary discipline, he accumulated a power that most people spend their whole lives chasing and never reach. 1 month after the will was made public, the construction began on the new school buildings in Millbrook County. And on the morning the first ground was broken, on a cold December day with a thin layer of frost still on the grass, Ms. Carter stood at the edge of the construction site and thought about the morning Raymond had sat across from her desk. She thought about how he had looked, thin, quiet, wearing that flannel shirt. And she thought about how badly she had misjudged him, how she had looked at the surface and seen nothing worth noticing. She said later in an interview, "Raymond Cole taught me that the most extraordinary lives are often the quietest ones. The people who change the world are sometimes the ones you walk right past." And I want to ask you something directly now. Have you ever walked past someone and assumed you knew their story? Have you ever written someone off because of how they dressed, where they lived, what they drove? Because Raymond Cole spent 76 years being written off. And while everyone was busy not noticing him, he was quietly, patiently, methodically building something that would outlast every single person who ever pitted him. The school buildings will stand for 100 years. The scholarship fund will send thousands of children to college. The hospital wing will save lives that have not even been born yet. That is Raymond Cole's legacy. Not the number, not the billions, the lives, the children, the futures. What would you have done if you had been Raymond? If you had watched your account grow past 1 million, then 10 million, then 100 million, would you have stayed quiet? Would you have kept the truck and the soup and the flannel shirt? Or would it have changed you? There is no wrong answer, but it is worth thinking about. It is worth sitting with, because it says something about what we really believe wealth is for. Raymond believed wealth was for building something that mattered. He just took the long way around to get there. And he did it entirely alone, entirely on his own timeline, entirely on his own terms. If that is not one of the most quietly powerful things you have ever heard, I do not know what is. They buried Raymond Cole in the small cemetery behind the church he had attended for 30 years. The headstone is simple, just his name, his dates, and a single line beneath them that Ms. Carter chose herself after reading through Raymond's private journals. The line comes from something Raymond had written years ago, in small, careful letters on the inside back cover of one of his library books on investing. He had written it for no one in particular, or maybe for himself, on a night when the silence got heavy. It reads, "A man's worth is not what he spends. It is what he builds when no one is watching." Raymond Cole built $1 billion when no one was watching, and then he gave it all away. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, does this story change the way you think about the quiet people in your life? Does it make you want to reconsider someone you have written off? And if something like this happened in your own family, if you found out a loved one had been quietly carrying a secret this big, how do you think you would feel? Proud? Hurt that they never told you? Both at the same time? Tell me. I genuinely want to know what you think. And before we close out today, If you are watching this and you are in a season of your life where it feels like no one sees you, where it feels like everything you are doing is invisible and unnoticed, and maybe even pointless, I want you to hear this. Raymond Cole was invisible for 50 years. And then he changed an entire town. Do not count yourself out. Do not let anyone else count you out either. The quiet ones are very often the most powerful ones. They just know how to wait. That if this story moved you the way it moved me, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. We tell stories just like this one, stories about real people, real lives, and the kind of truth that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. And our next story is about a woman who spent 40 years working as a hospital janitor, who no one ever looked twice at, until the day she walked into a board meeting and took her rightful seat at the table. You are not going to want to miss that one. We will see you there.